BA in Art History from Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee in 1997. He completed an MA in Contemporary Art at the Sotheby's Institute of Art in London, after which he attained a second MA with the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College in New York State. He's worked in London, Paris, New York, Scotland, and Memphis in the field of contemporary visual art, including Delta Axis and the Memphis Brooks Museum. He's also organized numerous freelance exhibitions locally and internationally. Among the museum catalogs to which he has contributed writing or production assistance are Les Années Pop, Centre Pompidou, Paris 2001, and Highlights of the Brooks Museum, Memphis 2004. In 2004, he founded Lantana Projects, an international artist residency program in Memphis. For 3 years, Whedon worked toward the cultivation of future leaders in the arts as assistant director of the Rhodes College Center for Outreach and the Development of Arts, or CODA. As executive director of Urban Art, Whedon currently works to further the organization's mission to enhance the cultural vibrancy of Memphis through the development of public art.
Wow, thanks. I appreciate that. I don't know who that guy is anymore. It was like bringing up past lives that I've forgotten. Thanks, Jude. It's like the most thorough introduction I've ever had. Let me first apologize for being late. It's not my habit to do so. So I'm going to try to keep this swift, because if you're like me, you've got families at home, you want to go see, you want to have dinner, and you want to get ready for the day ahead, tomorrow. Cheech really summed up my background in a very succinct way. My home is Memphis, although I've traveled a good deal, primarily over Europe, in the field of contemporary visual art, with an emphasis on public practice. I've been with the Urban Art Commission here since 2008. Taking over from my immediate predecessor, who was the first executive director, a wonderful woman named Carissa Usal, who is currently the director of the National Ornamental Metal Museum down on the Bluff. She was there for 10 straight years, and so I give her a lot of kudos for a lot of heavy lifting, because it was under her leadership and that the board at the time that established the primary generator of our work locally, which is the Percent for Art ordinance through the city of Memphis. The Percent for Art ordinance in Memphis allows for up to 1% of the general obligation bond amount of eligible capital improvement projects in any given fiscal year for construction, new construction built by the city government for the allocation of funds for public art and design enhancements to municipal facilities and the public realm within the city limits of Memphis. That's a mouthful, and it's a lot of technical speak, but basically what it means is if they build a new library, a percentage of that construction cost goes to a pool that's for public art, and we work with the city to decide how best to implement those funds to have an impact for your art and design. Because in our basic practice, we're here to fulfill our mission as a nonprofit, which is to enhance the cultural vibrancy of communities through the development of public art. We believe that the interaction of people within space and the interaction of stimulating, thought-provoking, visually dynamic design matters, and it makes an impact. It does so in a variety of different ways, as I'm sure you've already discussed throughout the course of this curriculum. Primarily anti-blight, community building, economic impact with the stress on talent retention and recruitment of new businesses. I'm going to go through a bit of our portfolio with you today, some of the highlights of our past projects, and then I want to focus on what I think are some of the low-hanging fruit that we could focus on as Memphians within the infrastructure of our own city that could make some tremendous impact for relatively low cost. And I see a few familiar faces. Todd, I see you. Rick, always good. I don't know what backgrounds most of you are. Could you quickly go around the room and introduce yourselves? That way I can tailor what I talk to have the most impact. Miss?
I'm Rosalie Back. I work with the Urban Farms Market at Farmers Market and Freshwood Cornerstone.
Rob and Tillman, just open up there.
Exactly.
Fantastic, well done.
Thanks.
Nathan Cook and I go way back.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
So Ronnie Neal, I'm the Vice Mayor of Somerville.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
James Stolz, I'm on the Land Use Control Board.
to see you again. We've done some work together.
Yes, we have.
Going to do some more.
That's right. Michelle Smith, representing Orange County, also University.
Lee Henson, Director of Shelby County Conservation.
Diane Clark, planner in Clarksville.
Sean Nation, also a planner for Clark.
Bobby Allen, engineer, City of Memphis Stormwater Program.
Okay.
Mary Shaw, Realtor with Twilight Realtors, and I represent the land use control.
And we need no introduction, Rick.
Masson.
Rick could actually give a lot of insight to the history of urban art in Memphis because he was instrumental in helping the Percent for Art ordinance go through in its early days. It was 2002, was that correct?
No,
Was it before that?
2004. That, I think in '06, might have been 2000, I mean 2000, maybe it was, this was.
Supposedly the
about
ordinance
2000.
was passed in 2002 formally, but all the lead up to it took, I'm sure, a few
Oh, yeah,
years to get all of
yeah.
it.
It started in '96, our
Legislation.
discussion started in '96, and, like just 4 years later.
Well, thank you. You're the reason I'm here today. For one thing.
It's great, you know, we should talk about it.
I'd love to, in depth and on purpose.
Yeah, right.
To date, Urban Art has worked with projects in 56 individual locations throughout Memphis and Shelby County. We are a nonprofit, therefore we work with a variety of different partners, not just the city of Memphis, but also the city schools, which has its own voluntary Percent for Art program, which is also very dynamic as well. The thing about the schools programs are most of their projects are interior. So unless you have a child that attends White Station Middle School, for example, you'll never know there's a masterpiece of a mosaic that does this all credit to our society to have this exquisite work of art there. We also work with private development groups, including Boyle Investment. We're talking with Loeb now to work on a number of their parcels involving one-story murals on neighborhood shopping centers, for example, including one that's coming up across the street from our office on Broad Avenue. It's a 200-foot-long warehouse wall that's going to be painted by a visiting artist from France, of all places. But Mr. Bob Loeb happened to meet in passing at a show in Miami and said, "I like your work, come to Memphis." And so he is. Starting Monday, you're going to see that block transformed into the vibrant tapestry of color. We're all very excited about it. I am somewhat technologically, I got it.
Forward, reverse, pointer in the middle.
Even I can do it. Okay,
Don't touch the-
don't touch the button that says
That's just a draw.
explode. Right. Okay. I just want to go through some brief rationale of what we do and how we do. We are a nonprofit. Common misconception is that we are a part of government. We are not. We partner with government as a subcontractor. As opposed to other municipalities who have government departments of cultural affairs, for example, or art and public places being another typical municipal department. Chicago, for example, has a very dynamic Department of Cultural Affairs. Memphis often partners with other nonprofits to provide these types of services. Urban Art Commission is just that. We commission projects. So our board of directors are voluntary. They are not appointed. They are not elected. We do manage the Percent for Art programs for the city as well as the city schools. We also work with MATA on a case-by-case basis. For example, we're working on their South Terminal and part of the Aerotropolis project now. We're also working with the Aerotropolis Working Group, who is in that meeting on Wednesday, to develop a project along Cloud Boulevard right now. You may have driven past and seen a number of plantings put in. Trust me, in 10 years it's going to be the most densely forested plot of earth in Memphis, and it'll be beautiful. But we're working to layer in a public art enhancement as well, and so that's very exciting. We've also partnered with academic institutions, the Rhodes College Center for Outreach and Development of Arts. We led an apprenticeship with them to produce the mural at Redbird Stadium. Perhaps you've seen that along Madison Avenue. That's the largest mural in the city by far, and most likely will remain such for probably our entire lifetimes. That was the result of essentially a summer internship of 4 Rhodes College students apprenticing under ourselves in how to operate a public art project. So that's the result. This stuff, while it can be complicated, and there are a lot of moving parts, because anytime you're dealing with community groups with different opinions about how things should be done, you're going to have to spend a good deal of time getting to know each other and to feel out where everybody's coming from, what their ambitions, what their goals, what their opinions are, and what matters to them in the storytelling you're going to do. That is actually probably the largest part of our work. The first third to a half of our project management activity on any project is really the selection process and the community engagement process. Once the design is set and approved and all thumbs up, the fabrication is relatively smooth. It's really relatively swift. So if you're considering these types of projects, just consider what type of project you want to have. Committees do have a purpose, but they often slow things down. So just be aware of that. Private development projects don't often have to deal with committees as much, but so they move a bit swifter, but sometimes they may or may not have as much emotional buy-in and importance to those that surround it and look at it every day. Over 84% of our projects have been completed by local artists since our founding in 1997. That's something we are very, very proud of. The local ordinance through the city of Memphis mandates that 60% must be produced by local artists within a 5-year period. So we're hitting that out of the park, and we believe we're going to be consistently maintaining that level in the future. Currently, we have 54 individual projects in progress across all our partners' caseloads. That's, as I mentioned earlier, MATA, city, schools, private, public, grant-funded, etc. And that's anything from, when I say a project, that's anything from a $500 weekend volunteer painted board up with MIFA along Hernando or Linden, both of which really swift, low cost, high impact. We get, shout outs from it every day. Did you guys do that great job on Linden? Fantastic. Yes, we partner with community groups to make that happen. It took a day. Show up in the morning, you paint for a day, and pow, no more eyesore. It's just an easy thing to do. So it doesn't have to be rocket science. And it's fun. Those types of things, people can literally roll up their sleeves and pitch in and feel like they've made a part of making Memphis great. A little bit nicer of a place to enjoy and live in day to day. When we're composing these selection committees, they are composed primarily of residents and also the site managers of the various facilities. If it's a library, there are librarians. If it's a parks facility, the community center representative or managers are there, as well as various art and design experts throughout the town, be they from the universities or different architectural firms or design firms, et cetera, et cetera. We fervently believe that when public art is produced by locals, that it means jobs for locals. And those funds, 20% of the project budget goes to the artists for their intellectual property and design fee. The rest goes for fabrication and materials. Memphis is blessed with an abundance of painters that have access to wonderful student assistants, so we often layer education programming for new generations of public artists through these projects. Not only for murals, but also for tile work. There's a strong community of tileists. There's also an excellent history of metal fabrication in this town, as many of you will be familiar. The welding community here is excellent. The bronze casters are excellent bronze casters, not many, but some really expert outfits such as Luger out in Eads, if you're familiar with them, they do wonderful bronze. So we are able to really retain even the fabrication expenses locally as well. The engineering and design subcontracting, we can source locally too. So, 9 times out of 10, almost 100% of every project budget is staying within the Shelby County, which is a great, great thing. The project budgets lowest would be approximately $25,000 for some sort of painted mural. And then the highest it's been, to my knowledge, that was city funded was approximately $140 for the Court Avenue Bridge interactive lighting design piece. And I've got a photo of that as well. So really, when you're in terms of municipal budgets, it's relatively dropping a very big rainbow of public funds. We believe it provides impact not only in terms of quality of life, it retains new talent and attracts new business, but it heightens the awareness of our own city's culture and the vibrancy that the arts have played here in our history, not only music, in the visual arts, in literature, et cetera, et cetera. So rather than let our built environment go into a state of decay or a state of boredom even, we believe that we should reflect that vibrancy of our culture on our sleeves, so to speak. Let's put our best foot forward and brighten up our landscape in ways that excite the imagination and build community buy-in to making a better town. That also plays into the tourism factor. When you have things for people to see, they spread the word that Memphis is a great place to have fun at and visit and view new attractions. While some in my profession would poo-poo my couching public art as an entertainment possibility, it is just that. I have fun going to look at art when it's well done. I have fun participating in these projects. Visitors travel the world trying to find new and engaging spaces to take part in, and public art is an instrumental catalyst in that condition. We already touched on talent retention and recruitment. I think that we can all agree that one thing that has been of prominence in our city as of late since the new mayoral administration has come into full force has been the drive to attract new business. I'm thinking about Electrolux, I'm thinking about Mitsubishi, Sharp expanding their solar panel plant, the new brewery that's coming in, taking the old Coors facility, et cetera, et cetera. Each of these businesses have a choice of where to relocate or where to build anew. And when faced with a similar city of similar circumstance, and we weigh up all the factors, crime is going to be a major one, education is going to be a major one, pilots and development-minded community is going to be a major one. But there's also that livability factor. What are their workers going to do after their 9 to 5? How will they spend their time? Will they enjoy living in this place we're going to relocate them to? When put together next to a city that has a vibrant built environment, including public art and design, and one that does not, more often than not, the one with a vibrant public realm is going to win out. Because they can say, if we move you to Memphis, you're going to enjoy your life more than the one that does not. That's where we get into placemaking, and that was the nominal topic of today. Here are a few examples of our many completed projects. That's the Redbird Stadium mural that I mentioned earlier, which was a result of a student project, essentially. That was entirely privately funded by a Board of Trustees member of the college, a gentleman named Wilton Chick Hill. He was fortunate enough to do well in the hotel development industry and continued to call Memphis his home and wanted to give back. And so he owned this old building. I believe it dates from before 1910, and it's currently unoccupied, and it was just a big blank wall staring everybody that went to go see a baseball game in the face. And so he took it upon himself to engineer the funds and make that happen. The most recent addition to our public art landscape is actually through the city schools program, and that image beneath the Redbird Stadium is one at Central High School. That is an artist rendering of the final piece, but it looks pretty close to that. And that is overlooking historic Crump Stadium. If you drive by Linden or Cleveland, you can see it. It just got finished this week, actually. And so we're very proud of that. We'll be doing a public dedication on May 6th for that. I believe it's Representative Hardaway is going to give it an official proclamation as a state artistic landmark. So those are the kinds of things we like. Those are the two largest scale murals in the city to date, and they've occurred within the past 3 years under our guidance. And so,
Did Anthony do the bottom one? Or no?
I'm sorry, the top one is by a gentleman named Jeff Zimmerman. The bottom one is by an artist named Josh Titus. Anthony Lee, who is local, and I told you about our education program, and we try to apprentice local artists with these experts when they take on these projects. Anthony Lee is a gentleman local. He did a piece along Central Station by the Arcade Restaurant. These red icons, the graphic icons along that wall, as a part of our 10th anniversary program, and he apprenticed on both of these. So he's building the technical savvy and painterly skills to do these on his own. So we're trying to build that resident base of experts locally, so that when other opportunities come up, we can funnel them to those projects because they all have learned from the best nationally. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just curiosity, I'll also tell you to do something like that.
Again, the design took the longest part. The top one, Chick Hill, brought the opportunity to Rhodes College in September of 2007, and it finished up in April of 2009. So from concept to completion, about a year and a half-ish. Actual paint time, Zimmerman started that in February, and he was done by end of April. Yeah. And that, the image, the wall is 75 feet tall, and it's about 120 long, and I think the image itself is approximately 5 stories. So that gives you an idea. He was working really fast. And the way he did it, if I can get a bit, I tend to geek out a little bit when I talk about this stuff. So if I go too much of a tangent, you just say, John, calm down, and I'll move swifter. But one thing about both of these pieces, they used a new technology called polytag, which is a fabric. It was first invented as the lining of men's dress jackets. And an artist named Kent Twitchell in Los Angeles in the late 70s started experimenting with it on canvas as a substitute for canvas because it was cheaper. You could buy it by the bolt, and it went farther than traditional artist canvas. He found it held color really well, and then, weirdly enough, it was waterproof. And so he started painting with acrylic paints, and he made these wonderful 3-4 story tall murals out of polytag, colloquially known as parachute cloth, in the sense that it worked like wallpaper. He could tape it up in the studio in the dry and in the heat. In the midst of winter, he could work inside, he could draw on it, he could paint it, he could cut it, he could roll it up, put it under his arm, drive across the country, and put it on a wall, and put it up with acrylic gel medium like you would a wallpaper almost. And when it's done, it's basically bulletproof. I mean, it's going to stand the test of time. This stuff was first really used successfully in Los Angeles and then Philadelphia. So the real test is Philadelphia because they've got the climate change of hot and cold. There's a piece that Kent Twitchell did in Philly of Dr. J, dressed in a suit, and he's 3 stories tall. That was in 1982, and it looks fresh as a daisy today. And it's beautiful. And the neighborhood loves it. These things become icons not only to the people that had a little part in facilitating the production, but to the people around them. This makes our community more distinctive. It makes it more Memphis. These are unique pieces. These are not thrown up in Atlanta. These are not in Chicago. These are in Memphis. These are part of our landscape in our town now. The great thing about the bottom one by Josh Titus, who's done work internationally, is he worked with the students at Central High School for a full year to get the imagery just right, and so he was engaging the students in what were most important in their lives and what were some issues they were facing with in the school, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the intervening along the top had to do with the notion of reconciliation and peace within communities, different demographics, within different age groups, within different classes, within different roles, et cetera, et cetera. And the official title was actually My Eyes Have Seen the Glory. They took their inspiration from Dr. Martin Luther King. Those were some of the last words he spoke at his mountaintop speech here in Memphis. So they took that as the jumping off point. So the students in Central High School art classes learned not only how to generate content and to facilitate community meetings and committee decision-making process, by which I'm sure all of you have to engage in all the time to get anything done. So valuable lesson learned there. But they learned how to use the materials on really an industrial scale, building marketable career skills. So those kids can now go on to university, or they can go into other apprenticeships, working with other artists, sharpen their skills, and then apply for projects nationally. I want to emphasize that we have a large caseload of those. I said 54 individual projects. That is large, comparatively nationwide. But there are routinely projects of this scale occurring across the country. And public art, if you work at it like any discipline, like any medium, like any career field, can be a viable way to make a living. And so these kids are learning that they don't just have to be graphic designers, they can do that, and they can also do this. They can diversify, and they can be successful. A couple of our other signature projects are the Tom Lee Memorial. We're all very proud to have a part in that. That plaza is routinely talked about, and every time I go down, there's either a school group or a family reading the history of the piece. The one on the bottom is by Anthony Leith, the gentleman we spoke of earlier that apprenticed on the two other murals. That piece was a low-dollar piece that was privately donated in commemoration of our 10th anniversary in 2008, and it was done for $5,000, including artist fee and paint. And literally, he got a projector, he projected the image at night, traced it with chalk, went back and painted in the lines. That simple, that easy. We worked with MATA to establish the user agreement and right of entry. It was meant at first only to be a temporary piece. If they weren't pleased with the outcome, then we volunteered to paint over it at no cost to you. They loved it, and so we kept it. And we hear tell from the residents across the street that they don't have to rue coming home to the gray mile, as they used to call it. Now they've got something on their doorstep that makes South Main distinctive and their neighborhood something memorable. This was also done through partnership with Rhodes College students, as well as some NCA kids at the time. Again, a mural piece about underpasses, and we're going to talk a little bit more about underpasses in a few minutes. Underpasses are one of those heat infrastructure, built environment pieces that we all encounter throughout our day-to-day in Memphis. Most of them were built around 1912 or something. Many of them, if not most of them, are literally crumbling as we speak. And they are one of the primary contributors to blight, in my opinion, of our city. They attract graffiti, they become hazardous for cement falling on passersby and cars, et cetera, with a bit of cleanup and restoration and a good image on the undercarriage of these things. They can really be translated from eyesores to community assets. And so this is on Bellevue Boulevard, just before you turn the corner to go to the Stax Museum. The images are record labels and portraits of some of the wonderful musicians that made that record label famous and made Memphis famous. It becomes a tourist destination from all over the world. When you're visiting the Stax Museum, they tell them, go see the mural. And we have photos of people from Australia taking their picture, right? Otis Redding's portrait and things like that. So not only can it improve the kind of light solution. Again, that was a relatively small budget. I would say that was about 25,000 total. It can provide a lasting impact. It's actually on both sides of the street, and it goes down, there's 2 underpasses, so it's actually quite an extensive piece. Then many of you will have seen the Cooper Young trestle sculpture piece on a disused rail line. Railroads sometimes have a bad reputation. Not a bad reputation, but a reputation of being difficult to partner with because their processes are very lengthy and it takes a long time and it's bureaucratic, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, rightly so, they've got a liability to worry about and whatnot. If you can work with often the public relations division of the railroad, you can sometimes get things done a little bit faster than you would through the engineering departments. Because they value the community engagement piece. They value the piece that say they're a great community partner, et cetera, et cetera. We have had a great amount of success with Norfolk Southern recently, actually working a design for the underpass at Park and Ridgeway in East Memphis, far East Memphis. The Cooper Young Trestle was funded by the First Tennessee Foundation. That was at $50,000. That was a bare bones piece. The artist, I don't think they actually made too much from a profit doing the piece. They considered it a labor of love because she lived in the neighborhood and she wanted to do it. This piece actually lights up at night if you're not within the neighborhood. So it becomes an icon 24/7. The neighborhood itself uses this as an emblem for all their festivals and their Thursday nights out and their Cooper Young Association material, on and on and on.
And that is still an active train line?
No, it is not.
Oh, okay.
No, that particular one is not. The one above the Soulsville Gateway is. No. White Station Middle School, I mentioned that previously. But that is actually, there's about that much height on top of the end of what is visible in that image. So it's about twice as tall, and an additional third is long. So it's roughly 35 feet tall by 65 feet wide. It entails over 250,000 individual pieces of tile. The artist worked in the school, embedded in one of the art teacher's classroom for a full year, involved every single person associated with the school. Every child, teacher, parent, administrator, sanitation worker, coach, music teacher, you name it, librarian, you name it. They all physically made a piece, and then of course she made many more. But they all had a hand in crafting that piece. Commercial Appeal did a piece on it when it was debuted in 2009, and its banner or headline was "Masterpiece," and I fully concur. It's one of the gems, jewels in the crown of public art in Memphis. And if you ever have occasion to be in that neighborhood, make a call and make an appointment. They'd be happy to show it to you. They're really very, very proud of it. At the bottom, Central Library is a signature site. All the art and design enhancements of that facility were produced by the Urban Art, and they were all privately donated. Many people would assume, because it's a municipal facility, that the funding was also municipal. This was actually one of the projects that the organization took on in its very early days, before the Percent for Art program was actually established, as a demonstration project to show these city leaders that this stuff works and it can be done, and look at what a difference it makes. So not only the exterior plaza, but all the interior pieces as well. Shade structures are another popular built environment piece that are functional and aesthetic, pleasing at the same time. That's on top of the Bluff Walk at Vance Park, a very small park overlooking the river downtown. And that piece is called Whirl by a gentleman named John Medvedev. It replicates the eddies in the river and the whirl of the wind coming up the bluff. And so it was very suitable at the time. That bottom photo is a still image of the Court Avenue Bridge. The lighting design is interactive. We partnered with the Riverfront Development, Riverfront RDC, Ritchie Smith Architects, and a lighting design firm out of Los Angeles called Electroland to make this piece. It turns out that this is a new technology that is really taking off on both coasts and even internationally, but this is the first, what we call new media permanent public art piece in the Mid-South, certainly, and one of the few in the interior corridor of the country. In essence, beginning at dusk, the lights come on and they're on a timer to a certain sequence. Their color fades, they're all LED. So it's on a timer, but it's also motion activated. So if at 2 a.m. no one's walking across it, the effect still happens. As people walk through it, the colors change from blue to purple to green to yellow to red across the span. And then as people move their arms, you can mimic throwing a baseball down the span of the transom of the bridge, and it will literally, the light will go down the entire span of the bridge. So it's become a really popular destination for families with kids because the kids go crazy because they're literally making the lights work on the bridge, and it follows them as they go. That is one of the most remarkable and relevant to our topic today about placemaking that I've experienced since being in this position. You could not have convinced me for love or money 3 years ago that Confederate Park after dark would have been a family destination. I'm here today to tell you it's increasingly become so because there's this art piece there, and there's something to participate in and build community around, and build memories and shared stories about it. It also has to do with the fact that they cleaned up the park a good deal, and the new law school brings a lot of activity throughout the day and the night, so there are a lot more upstanding activities happening in the vicinity rather than perhaps ordinary well activities that would have been going on otherwise. Sorry? If you go down the street to the front and you take a left, right before you come to the University of Memphis Law School on Court Avenue, it goes all the way down to Riverside. It's on the Riverside end of Court Avenue, and it spans the street. Court Avenue goes down a total of 45-degree angle, but it's one of the steeper streets within the city. So it goes from the tip of Confederate Park over to behind the law school, and it basically extends the river. So that is one of the more recent projects that we've been very excited about. What I wanted to talk briefly about today, and we can discuss it in the group if you wish, or if you want to take this presentation, download it from Chooch's server that he'll give you a link to, I'm sure. Feel free to ask me questions after. Two things I want to talk about are pocket parks. This is a phenomenon that really started happening in the mid-1960s in New York. The director of the Parks Division at the time, a gentleman named Thomas Hoving. He was director of New York City Parks for 1 year, from 66 to 67. And before then, he was a curator at the Cloisters in New York of the medieval collection. And he had an idea, while he was director of parks, that the urban landscape should be a type of utopia where you had various sizes and scales of green spaces inserted within the urban environment. That you didn't necessarily need a vast, expansive land like Central Park or other parks nationally and internationally. They could be these, what he called, vest pocket parks. Intentionally, he called it vest pocket because it was extra small. And they were meant to be these pockets of calm and repose within the busy urban environment. And so you'll see Paley Park was the first in 1967. And Greenacre Park is not too far away. These are both around East 51st and East 53rd Street, respectively. His formula was greenery, seating, and what he termed good food at a reasonable price. So he envisioned concessions as well, but they were meant to be places where you can literally just take a rest on your way to work, on your lunch break, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Inserted in these odd plots where that wouldn't be really viable for commercial or residential development anyway. So let's build it as a community asset and make the area around it more desirable to occupy for commerce and residences, et cetera, et cetera. And it's taken off. Again, mostly on the coast and some of the larger cities, but I think that there are places and opportunities within our own city that could be scalable to make things like this happen. And I'm going to put out an idea here. And again, I'm not going to read all this. I don't expect you to read all of this, but you have it for reference if you want to take it away. You're most likely, or many of you are most likely familiar with what are termed tax parcels. They're odd-shaped plots that are on the city tax rolls because they built a road and there was an easement and they couldn't do anything with the scrap, basically. And so the city and county have all these shards and remnants of other parcels that are either too small or too weirdly shaped to do anything with. And they're all over the county. They're everywhere. And some of them, go for big bucks, but some of them they really don't, a couple of thousand. In some cases, they're so small that they go for less than 1,000. But they change often. Sometimes they stay for years, and sometimes they're snatched up and they're assembled in different pieces and they make something happen with. But basically, there was an artist named Gordon Matta Clark who in New York attempted to do something similar to this, using these remnant pieces along medians or thoroughfares or in between alleyways or the leftovers when something was developed. And he bought these pieces. And he decided he would make even smaller parks on them. And he made basically pieces of sculpture on these different parks. My idea is if there are groups locally willing to establish small funds, donor-sourced funds, to buy these small remnant tax parcels, turn them over to the artists of our city. Make them micro-sculpture parks or platforms for performances within the public room. Bring the vibrancy that is latent within our community to the fore by establishing small parcels on purpose. This is all very doable thing. You can actually contact the city real estate office via the attorneys listed there. There are some frequently asked questions about how it works underneath that. There are examples of different size and scale sculpture parks there for your reference internationally. This is something that's it's a bit weird. I'll give you that. It's a new idea. But it's a very doable idea, and it's very accessible to the grassroots of our town. These could be things that small nonprofits could do, church groups could do, giving circles within different neighborhoods, supper clubs, art clubs within the different universities could do within themselves. And then they've got their forum for public art and cultural vibrancy at their fingertips to do with whatever they wish. As long as they don't violate zoning or code issues. But for the most part, artists aren't in the business of building houses per se, so they're generally not going to get into that kind of issue. Move on. The second are underpasses. As I mentioned earlier,
I was just about to ask you if you knew Bill Fitzgerald.
I do not know him personally. Do you?
Yes.
You do? Oh, fantastic.
He was curator of the City Garden Sculpture Park in St. Louis
Great.
in the 70s.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Well, then you probably know not only this piece, but more of his work than even I may do. Underpasses, again, as I've said, are what I believe, they're prevalent throughout our community. They create a physical sense of foreboding to me sometimes, because they're sometimes so dimly lit and they're kind of not well maintained on a regular basis or often enough. And they get this sort of heavy weight to our town. They're often, you know, always concrete, they're gray, they're deteriorating, they're weathered, they feel kind of gloomy, etc. There's no reason why that has to be the case. If we transform these in-between spaces, again, from eyesores to assets, via a fresh coat of paint in an innovative style as done by Sheila Klein in Seattle, or by Mr. Fitzgibbons in San Antonio with lighting design, you've got an attraction, you've got a landmark, you've got a value add to the built environment rather than just a thoroughfare that people want to get out of quickly on their way to other destination points. So, our organization, Urban Art, has been in discussions with a number of railroads for about 2 years, as well as the city Division of Engineering, Building Design, Construction, and what division is Mr. Teeter with? I always
Engineering, public works.
Public Works. Okay, I always get it confused. Actually, Stormwater is probably the only division we don't work with in the engineering.
We can change that.
We could change that. Let's work on it. But we're in the works and trying to find ways to secure the permissions that are needed from the property owners, being the railroads themselves. Yeah.
I would assume in an endeavor like that, that what happens is the artists and certain donations will come in to make this happen, but then I'm assuming the city agrees to upkeep and continual electrical supply and stuff like
Well,
that.
through the Percent for Art program, it would be funded. The maintenance is a separate fund within the Percent for Art program. So yes, maintenance would be ongoing through the Urban Art Commission and the Percent for Art program. And then any contingency is also through that, and then the electrics is also ongoing through that. So yes, there would be, and I'm not the real estate right of entry expert by any means. I'm actually talking to David Street right now about developing a special mural easement, which we're working on for use with private property, which would be really outstanding if we can figure that out. There are ways to make it happen, but as I told Mr. Teeford and some other individuals in BDC not too long ago, every time I think I've got the perfect formula, there's 15 other layers of formulas that you've got to figure out. But I do have confidence that within my tenure at Urban Art that we'll find a way to enter into these user agreements to paint the things on purpose and address the things in a bona fide, upright way, and not just do it, you know, guerrilla grassroots style and everybody show up with a bucket and a brush and paint the thing. Which you're tempted to do sometimes, and I know many other community groups are often tempted to do that, and sometimes they do it. But it's best if we follow the rules so we can do it ad infinitum, and we don't have to worry about liability issues, insurance issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sometimes they happen late at night when nobody knows.
That is sometimes true. That is sometimes true. We generally try to alleviate that stuff that happens late at night when nobody knows. But
Well, a good example of that are the crosswalks on Brown Avenue.
yeah, right.
Broad Avenue Business Association and a few of us that were doing the New Face for an Old Broad event. For that event, worked with some of the local schools in the neighborhood and just had the children come out and paint the crosswalks. And we just didn't even close the streets. We just had them blocked off ourselves and just figured we could do it and ask forgiveness later if they said anything. And they turned out great. And
Like the bike lane.
the bike lane we actually had permission
Well,
for.
the bike lane was cute, Chewish. I have to say, I mean, Chewish was out there in his sweatshirt and his extension rod and a board, making it out in the street. I thought that was really precious. Getting out there, doing it yourself.
Do you have much problem with people coming back, tagging your art, going home?
You know, we've had a little bit, but you know, the maintenance funds are there to alleviate that when it happens. But for the most part, like I said, we spend a lot of time in the neighborhoods beforehand. And we found, and this is sort of a trend nationally as well, if you get to know the neighbors and you make it to where it's their idea that's taking precedent, and they're, you know, aligning different age groups from the community to help, there's an ownership there. And so when you own, you feel a sense of ownership, you're going to be protective of the piece that you make. And that is often the best deterrent of vandalism of any kind. When it does happen, we have the means to restore. But for the most part, it's been very little, which is it makes me proud of our town, actually. And I think I've also learned through the grapevine that there's somewhat of a graffitist code of ethics that if it's a real artwork, then they tend to go someplace else. They tend to respect the fact that there's a piece of art there.
Yes.
Not always. There are different levels of these vandals. You know, there's those that respect the art and they'll go someplace else and make a mess of things. And then there are gang-related activity which respects nothing of the kind and will pretty much do whatever they want. And some of them are just 13-year-olds with spray cans and they're getting it out of the system. But anyway. Yeah.
I just want to mention, Bill Fitzgibbons is from Memphis. Born
I
and
did
raised
not
here.
even realize that. Is that right?
Yeah, Y Station grad.
Fantastic.
And UT and Potter University, and got his master's.
Where is he now?
In San Antonio.
He's in San Antonio now. I didn't introduce my colleague Whitney Ranson. I apologize, everybody. Could you make a note to contact Mr. Fitzgibbons because we've got some ideas we're doing. In a nutshell, everyone, this is what I prepared for you today as really just a means to start your own wheels spinning. And if you see opportunities for these types of enhancements throughout our community in your day-to-day, give us a call, let us know. We'd love to partner with you on different projects if it becomes viable to do so. I'm going to leave my card here as well. And I want to go through a little bit of links for further research for you. That's my card. It's got my email and my phone number. Anti-blight applications, murals. That is the link to the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program, which came out of a precursor called the Anti-Graffiti Network, which was funded by the city of Philadelphia in 1982. And now since 1982,
I'll be sending this to you tomorrow, so you can download off the site.
you don't have to write it down.
And then while you're at it, I would recommend looking through the, you know, all on my website, we have every semester listed under there, and John has done this class for several semesters.
So there are other.
And then he's got presentations, his presentation is different every time. So you can see artwork from all around the world. So just look for John Whedon on there on the past semesters, and you'll be able to download all of his presentations. So.
Briefly, I'll just tell you what the links are. Thank you, Chooch. That first one is Philadelphia, as I said. They've been working since 1982 to rehabilitate youth vandal offenders into productive art careers as public artists and mural makers, to the extent that now some of the original participants of the anti-graffiti program are now leading the program 30 years later, and they have produced in excess of 3,000 individual murals since 1982. They've got 100 in the works at any given point in the year. They've worked with over 300 individual artists, and they have really become densely rooted throughout all facets of society. Youth programs, ex-criminal offender programs, rehabilitating as constructive citizens, etc., senior programs, on and on and on, to the point where now artists that want to be a muralist move to Philadelphia for the work and the learning and the education. We are currently in talks with their director of mural operations to work with our own mural program, which the city just funded in FY11. We have 7 local artists producing 1 mural in each of the 7 city council districts beginning this summer. They've been in their training for about 2 months. They worked with Josh Sarantitis on the Central High School mural to get that firsthand experience. They'll be working with the French artist I mentioned that's going to do the mural on Broad Avenue. And then Seth Turner is coming down from Philadelphia. He's the director of mural operations for the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program. He runs all the teams that does all the murals. If there's any one tech guru of mural making, this guy's it. And he loves Memphis, he's been here 4 times, and he loves coming back and doing workshops. And so we're gonna bring him back in May. If any of you are interested in sitting in on his session, get in touch and we'll give you the details. But we're trying to learn from the best so that we can be the best, and so that our local artists can be the best as well. Reverse graffiti is a kind of a fun new phenomena where literally people are not putting anything on the wall, they're removing grit and grime from the surface of underpasses with brush and soap. So they're actually cleaning images out of the existing dirt, which is a bit of a new twist on things.
I heard that they want to do that on the garage, at the Monroe Street garage.
Kat Pena is
Yeah.
working on something, I believe through TDOT, Keep Tennessee Beautiful. And they contacted us about a year and a half ago about artists that may have new ideas about environmental connections to art practice. And Kat Pena at the Woods College of Art, Director of Public Programs, is very much of that mindset. And so she's doing a reverse graffiti piece where she's cleaning the backside of that garage. And I believe she has a living wall component as
Yes.
well, which is a green, basically you establish a mesh system on the surface of the wall, you spread soil, seed mix, and it grows grass in patterns. It's like a geopad. No, very much. The living wall is the temporary piece, and those are both temporary, very short-lived projects, but they excite the imagination and they make us dream of new possibilities. Well, if you can make art by removing dirt, there's a lot of dirt to remove, why don't we get to work? So we're also about trying to inspire those new ways of thinking. Inhabitat is a wonderful website for all things urban design, in my mind. Reclamation projects, Agnes Dens, through the Queens Museum, did a project called Wheatfield in Battery Park at the tip of Manhattan in the early 80s, I want to say, right before the development came in. She basically planted a wheat field where Battery Park now stands. And so you can visit that link and see all these outstanding images of the Statue of Liberty next to a wheat field. Just these really incongruous things that you would never expect. But she, again, making us conceive of the urban environment in a new way and reinserting the role of agriculture and sustainability and urban gardening, urban farming through that. AS220, Todd knows more about this than I do, but I put that up as an example of community development. Krenka, what's his first name?
Bert Franklin.
Bert, is it actually Umberto?
Umberto.
Umberto Krenka started out as a community activist in Rhode Island, in Providence, back in the 70s, was it?
25 years ago.
Maybe 80s. And he's since parlayed the community goodwill and funds to purchase a number of different buildings in which he's developed public art and performing art and exhibition studios, training programs for career building for local youth, etc. And thereby affecting the entire district of the city for the better. The Heidelberg Project is out of Detroit. Many of you will be familiar with the thinning out of population that's occurred in Detroit over the past several years. There are entire sectors of the city which are essentially ghost towns. On Heidelberg Street, the residents decided to take a stand and transform their environment through public art and murals into an attraction and something that people could buy into and be a part of. So now it's a series of studios, sculpture parks, mural making facilities, etc. Kat Pena is actually bringing the founders of the Heidelberg Project to town in September. So you may want to look her up and get details from that. We're partnering with her to make that happen. Project Row Houses, a gentleman named Rick Lowe started this in Houston several years ago. And essentially he did the same thing where he took a really derelict series of row houses on a couple of blocks in South Houston and transformed it into art, live, work spaces for the residents that were already there. So he's really empowered the population base that was already living there and working there and improved their education and their buy-in and their ability to develop careers through arts practice from the ground up. Digital graffiti is about video projection that happens in Alice Beach, Florida every year. They essentially transform the landscape into a series of moving picture galleries. That visit that and I think you'll be blown away. Figment is a festival that happens on Governor's Island in New York every year. It's more of a performance-based project. Prospect New Orleans is a biennial that took place first in 2010 and is going forward on a basis of every other year. Again, it was established as a means to bring life to certain quarters of the city after Katrina that, of course, devastated that region. And also as a means to tell the story of New Orleans. So it's very much about expressing the innate creativity and identity of the city itself to visitors as well as residents themselves. We'll get a link to the history of pocket parks. We'll get some outstanding examples of cities that are doing great things with pocket parks, including Indianapolis. And then the Project for Public Spaces and Streets Wiki have great examples of pocket parks already. And I think that is it, everyone. We did that in an hour. Yeah. I'll stick around for questions. Anybody ask questions?
Quick question. When you compare Memphis to other cities of comparable size, Louisville or Birmingham or San Antonio, how does Memphis compare in terms of public art projects and support, both financially and kind of public support for what's going on?
Well, I think it's a reflection of the history of our town overall. Memphis has never been an extremely wealthy populace. It's been primarily agricultural and light industrial and transit oriented. It's been accustomed to being more utilitarian mindset, and Memphis is a bootstrap town. We don't have a lot of patience for frivolity or excess sometimes, but we do like a good party. We like a good band that's playing the blues in different quarters of the city. Public art is sort of a newcomer to the cultural dynamic of the town. There have been statues. That's a traditional public art. There have been murals in the past. You may remember Ellis Auditorium back several years ago had murals that were from the WPA, Works Progress Administration, in the 30s. And when they rehabilitated or redesigned the space, those got lost. There are murals, interior murals, tucked away throughout this town. It's almost like a treasure hunt. When I find a new one, I'm just a kid in a candy store. It's wonderful. But by and large, it has not had the history. Rick can give probably the best account. We do need to talk history. I'd love to take you lunch with that. But because we came to the program, Percent for Art model in the late 90s, early 2000s, it's about 40 years after that phenomena first started to take place in Philadelphia in 1959. Was the first Percent for Art program. So there are major metropolitan areas with more populace, more disposable income, more tax base, more CIP going on, and has funded this stuff for longer. And I think that really, because our projects have been really spread out across such a wide area over so many years, that you don't get a lot of momentum from quarter to quarter to quarter yet. And we're trying to layer into that to where you do go through different districts of the city and you don't just see one thing. You go down the road and you see 4 or 5 or 6 things in the span of a 5 to 10 minute journey. And I think once we get that layering effect, Memphis will become known as, yeah, that's the home of the blues, birthplace of rock and roll. And did you realize how much public art there is? Where did that come from? We're looking forward to that day. And I also have to say that this is a good thing too. I mentioned the bootstrap mentality. The yes I can do it. I'm not going to take anybody else's word for it or wait for anybody else to do it for me attitude that invented rock and roll, for example. Other groups around town are taking up the public art mantle in new and different ways that are completely outside the realm of a traditional CIP project. And that's very exciting. Cat Penny at MCA being a great example. Life of Mary Claire, they they started the board up idea before we even got in touch with them. We saw them in the paper, and we gave them a call. How can we help? Can we do more? So people are starting to invent it on their own, and I think perhaps our commission and the leaders of the early days can take pride in the fact that, if anything, not only have they made great projects, but they've inspired others to try. And those people that are trying are doing. And so my measurement of success is not only how many projects we can do on time and on budget and how many neighborhoods, but how many other groups can we inspire to try to do things on their own. Because that will mean that we're not the only game in town. And I actually think that's a good thing. Yeah.
When we started it though, I mean, part of the idea was to sort of trigger,
Yeah.
the private sector.
Has not quite happened yet.
Yeah, it has, and why? I mean, since I've left, a lot of buildings were built out there in the, sort of the whole, mess of Poplar, 240. There's very little public art in that area out there. I mean, what's the deal with the private
Well,
sector really hasn't picked up the mantle?
That's our
I mean,
next
from my
chapter.
perspective, it's disappointing. I mean, the whole idea of,
Yeah.
the city, the 1% for art was that it would trigger, the private sector, which,
Yeah.
most of the building in the community, for the most part, is done. I mean, probably 70%, 60% is done by the private sector, so.
Many other cities have that
I know,
caveat in their
exactly.
ordinance where private development groups are also mandated to spend 1% within their physical construction budget for the improvement of that campus or exterior, et cetera.
Maybe you should work with Center City, where if someone gets an incentive, then they'll
Well,
start to require them to do that kind of thing too.
okay.
Or power,
I can't
anywhere.
say what I want to say because I think there are things in the works.
You're being recorded.
I'm being recorded. I'll show my poker hand too fast. But no, you're right, it is disappointing, and that is the key step that needs to happen. When Wharton was at the county, they were developing the sustainable Shelby plan. They brought me in, OPD, and we were talking about, these types of built environment pieces, and we talked about the city CIP funding. What had to happen next was private development, pilots, exactly right thinking, pilots for public art. There are, through the CCC, pilots available for public art now, but they're really small and they're not very enticing. We've had initial conversations with different people for the past couple of years. That is the next big hill to climb. I think that there's actually quite a bit of willpower within the private development community locally to see something like that happen. Because in my goings around town, within those circles, there's a lot of positive feedback from it, and wondering how it works and how to put it together, et cetera. But I think we've relied on trying to do it on a case-by-case basis, which we just can't do. That's just, I'm one guy, we're a small board, there are a lot of developers doing a lot of work. I think that if it's going to take place, it's got to be through an ordinance, pilot incentive.
Do you think it's time to tweak the program now? I mean, it started, now it's set up such that the city's capital improvement plan determines the location and scale of the art. And it got it off the ground, but don't you think it needs to be tweaked now to move away from that?
It
Because
does. It
That's
does need to be tweaked, and it's a phased tweaking. We have actually accomplished some major gains in that regard. When it was established, new building meant new art at that new building site, which meant that some districts were getting a lot of public art, and some were getting nothing for years. It's just fundamentally unfair. There were neighborhoods that were clamoring for it, actually, but we couldn't do anything because, well, the city's not building anything in your neighborhood, so sorry. We went back to the process and got the language changed to where now that 1% goes into a general pool, and it can be applied anywhere in the public realm that is currently city held. That was the first step. Then we got the language changed to enable state held, including TDOT. We're working on a couple of parcels that may go through this in FY12 to TDOT. And then the next is private property. And I think that that's the inroad that we take to open up the pilot conversation and revise the ordinance as well for the private oversight. That's our goal. But, and you're well familiar, things kind of grind at us.
Right. I'm glad you moved that direction.
But we are thinking about that.
Last thing, there are two, pocket parks in South Main that I'd like you to come look at, Navy Park and Army Park.
Okay.
See
No,
what
those-
your
they need
thoughts
some
could
work.
be on that.
Yeah,
They need some
they need
work,
some
but I
work.
would be interested to see
Yeah.
what your thoughts are.
I'd love to do something with that, terminus there, it's just not skipping a jump from, South Main, Eugene Patterson, it's a big spot.
Yeah, it'd be a good spot.
Can you give us something to look forward to? What's 2 or 3 projects going on right now that you don't have photos for that you're really excited about?
First, I think would be the next icon for the city will be, Levitt Shell archway, entry from the top of the hill going into the shell. Someone named Chris Finnell. It'll be a circular archway that echoes the exact curvature of the shell itself. And then its design will mimic the tree canopy, so it'll blend into the existing vegetation. And then it'll slope along the top of the hill into a seating area. Entering from the Brooks Museum, it will appear as if it's meant to be a sunburst with tree pattern, etc. As you get closer to the main stage and look up, it'll read, the contour will be that of an acoustic guitar. So it's actually quite lovely. And that is, we're hoping to get it installed before the concert season, which is in a few weeks, so really pushing to get it in there. That's been in the works for a few years, and that's gonna be a really nice piece. Sometimes it's hard to remember 54 months.
University Place.
University Place just finished up with Tim Buckham. That's a really nice one. It's a cluster of family trees that the artist designed right by Club Avenue in front of the retaining basin for the pond and the fountain there. Give me something else. I'm really excited about the mural program, the 7 artists, because it's about education and it's about building skills locally and cultivating people that can be viable public artists, not only in the Mid-South, but nationwide. Now, I want Memphis to be known as a destination for public art and urban design, and for those that practice it from the artist standpoint. I want people to know that you go to Memphis to train, you need to move to Memphis, and you need to work with John and Urban Art and Chooch and all these guys, because they're going to sharpen the chops. That's probably what I'm most excited about right now. There are
Direct purchase just finished.
direct purchase, that's great. That's where we buy works from studio-based artists to adorn municipal facilities throughout the city. So wall hanging pieces or small sculptural pieces by artists who don't have the inclination to go big or go bronze, per se. So that's been a success. Literally, over the next couple of years, I'd say the current caseload should be wrapped up within the next 4 to 5 years. And it'll be adding to part and parcel of those years too. But we're primed of those 54, about a dozen are going to be finished this spring. So you're going to see things literally sprouting up all over, which is an exciting phenomenon. I'm also excited about the French guy coming and painting the wall across from our office because it's really lovely. And he's estimating doing that in 2 weeks. So you love it when something fast happens too. Anyway, guys, it's a pleasure talking to you. I had fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Get in touch.